Welcome to the Starter Girls podcast, the show dedicated to the Starter Girl. She's an achiever, she's a creator, she's a magic maker, she's a dreamer, and she is doing all the things. I'm your host, Jennifer Loading, and welcome to this episode. All right, welcome to another episode of the Starter Girls podcast. I'm Jennifer Loading, and I'm so excited about my guest today. She is amazing. She's an entrepreneur. She's a TEDx speaker, a podcast host, an investor, and of all things fun, a sports enthusiast. So I'm so excited to get her on the show. Amy Siegfried, welcome to the show, the Starter Girls. We are so thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, this is going to be so much fun. So I know you and I have chatted a little bit off camera, and so we're super excited. I do want to say to our guests, make sure you guys head on over to Behind the Dreamers where you can hear her story and learn a little bit about what she's doing, how she got there, kind of the insights behind all of that. We know on Starter Girls, our mission is to deliver content to our entrepreneurs, our female leaders, achievers, creators, and give them stuff that we know is going to help them be better out into the world and in their professions and all those things. And so I know Amy's going to bring some stuff to us. Amy, so real quick, tell us a little bit so our audience knows, in case they're just hearing this episode for the first time, a little bit about what it is that you do.
So I wear a multitude of hats. Primarily, I am the co-founder of a company called Last Night's Game, and we cover the world of sports for those who want to talk about sports, but really don't have any idea of what's going on in the field. Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift are a perfect example of the way we love to cover sports, a little pop culture that you understand with the side of sports. And so we have a podcast and an email newsletter. We just changed that out. Email newsletter that goes out once a week. And we cover it short and sweet. That is our whole goal, that you have enough on your plate, a little dose of something to make sports just another tool in your tool belt of success. So that would be hat number one. Hat number two, I am an adjunct professor. Hat number three, I am the vice chair and incoming board chair for Irish Angels, which is one of the country's largest angel investing groups. And then hat number 4, 5, and 6, mom, wife, sister, all the other things that we all deal with that we never get a badge for.
Yeah, I love this. And Amy, when we talk about like Starter Girls, and I don't know if I shared with you kind of the story about how this came about. I don't want to get all into all of that. But what I will tell you is, like, when I think of like a Starter Girl, I think of the female doing all the things, like wearing all the hats, right? Like the mom, the entrepreneur, the leader, the community server, all of those things. And you're doing it. And I love that. I think as entrepreneurs, a lot of us are kind of serial, I don't know how you want to say, serial entrepreneurs, serial leaders, whatever
serial
it is.
Doers,
we have our hands dabbling in many, many things. And I think that's what makes it so great about what we do. And that's what I love about this show, is that we can find, these gals like you that can come on here and shed light on how are you doing all these things. And so I know one of the things that you talked about is really how to support this up and coming generation. And you and I were talking a little bit before this about how, like the landscape is so very different from when we sort of entered into even the entrepreneur space, and then now where we are. And so let's dive into that a little bit. Tell us a little bit about where you are on that, what you're learning from all of this.
Well, it's really interesting. So as I've gone through my career, I realize that women don't have mentors like men do, right? I don't tend to see people asking for help. I don't tend to see, hey, Jennifer, can we sit down and meet once a month? There are some prescribed programs that I've been a part of. Forward Women is one of them. They're based out of Dallas. And that was a great program. But I've never really seen this mentorship for women. And I realized that I've never had a mentor. I had some really terrible female bosses, as most women will tell you they have had, because coming up through my career, it was very much, I got here, I worked to get here, so you're going to have to work to get here too, as opposed to having women help you up and really give you that perspective of, I hate the word balance, but balancing work and life and all of those perspectives. And what could you do? Where could you go? Because so much, it's still, even as the way it exists now, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And so having those mentors and having those people to pick you up and give you some perspective, to me, is so important. And I look at the pressures that I see my students. I teach at the collegiate level, just as a side hustle, why not? And I see the pressures that are on these students. And best represented, my father-in-law is an amazing human. He's a phenomenal businessman. So he always comes with me with all these questions. And he says to me, why is this generation feeling so stressed? Why are we talking so much about mental health? Like all these things, what's different that they're encountering that I didn't? And I said, well, what did you do at 18? When you were in college, what did you do? Went to class, went to parties, hung out with my friends. I said, okay, that's great. These kids go do that, but they're also seeing their peers excel at internships or do great things. Everything's happening on social media. And as we all know, I'm not immune to this. Social media makes everything harder. It makes things more convoluted. It makes you feel like you're behind. And like I said, I'm not immune to this. There are people I have to unfollow because they make me feel bad about myself. And that's totally on me. It's not their thing. That's on me. But I just realized that there's so many opportunities for us to be able to share perspective, to share our experience, to share whatever that is, to provide that leg up, to provide that hand and that cheerleading, that support that is needed to realize that you're going to do this. You have something phenomenal to offer. I don't care if you're 22. I don't care if you're 62. I don't care if you're 12. Talk to people that you want to learn from. And so for me, it just was with that kind of that continual thought pattern that I had and that I saw as I've kind of come along through my career of whether that's helping someone with their wedding registry. Our babysitter the other day said, can you help me with my wedding registry? Of course I can. I probably know what you need more than you do. And so for me, it's those things where it's being available and being that honest, true feedback and that honest, true person to give the perspective, I think is to me is so important. And I hope that those that I work with also feel that way, whether that's from a business perspective or from a personal life perspective. It's a very long-winded
Yeah.
answer, but
No, it's good. Well, and you touched I was writing things down as you were talking because interesting, yes, this mentor thing, this is something that I noticed too. Well, having, been in Mary Kay as long as I always had mentors. And so I started my journey in that in my late 20s. And so from I've had mentors all the way up to, my late 40s, I've had them. And so I never really understood the value of that until I recognized how many people really didn't have them and the difference it made in my life. Because the way I put it is that they gave me the ability to believe in myself when I didn't have that ability, right? Like
Mhm.
they were able to encourage me along when I didn't have the faith in myself and couldn't see that I could do the things that I wanted to do. And so
Right.
now in hindsight, I look at that and think that was very valuable tool. Is probably more valuable than anything that I learned in that time frame. And that is one of the things I've noticed is that yes, even in the entrepreneur space, a lot of people don't have those mentors and they really don't understand the value of that. And then you
Right.
also touched upon this social media, which I think too, because this question, I brought up, I actually had this conversation with my son the other day because my kids are 27. I've got one about to be 23 and then 19. So they're in that generation where they have been brought up on the social media, all of that stuff. And I asked my son one day, I'm like, why is it that you guys are so much more stressed or seem to be than we were? And you raise a valid point about this whole social media thing, because when we were younger, we would go home on Friday after school and we would go hang out with our friends, but we didn't know anything had happened unless we were there or we showed up on Monday, right? Like we didn't know. And we would get back on
Hmm.
Monday and what we would hear about all the things that happened over the weekend, right? But there
All the
was
things we
no
didn't get invited to do. Yep. Hmm.
Exactly. There was no get on social media and we realized, oh, so and so didn't invite us to this, or so and so is doing this, or this person, you're
Right.
right. We did not have all that in our faces day in, day out, just basically smothering us. And like you,
Right.
there are times like I hate to always say that I like unfriend. I don't typically like to like move anybody unless they're just really like driving me crazy. But I will be honest with you and I will say this. There are days I just shut it down. Like
Hmm.
I mean, and it'll go on for a while where I get onto Facebook for 2 seconds and I just scroll the top two posts. I'm like, I'm done. Like
Yep.
I'm going no further.
I'm not in a good place. And I think that's really interesting. And one thing I guess I'll bring up too, actually, it kind of led to your first one. I think being an entrepreneur is something that is challenging. The social media makes it very challenging, right? We see these people like Mark Zuckerberg, we'll call it. All my students talk about, I want to be Mark Zuckerberg. Well, that's great, but there's one Mark Zuckerberg, and he also has not made it. In his mind, he's still fighting for that top space. So I always remind them that while we think they've made it, they're still fighting, right? Facebook is still turning into Meta, which is just turning into this and that, and they're all doing these things. But one thing I would say too is one thing I did for myself, I should say, from an entrepreneurship perspective, I work by myself mostly. I work with my brother, but he works full time elsewhere, and so it's really just myself and half of his brain, which is a beautiful half, which is perfect. But I realized that I was trying to do all this stuff and trying to make this Mark Zuckerberg goal for myself, but I didn't have the know-how, right? Like I know what I know. I've had a good career. I've worked in corporate and all kinds of random places. I have an MBA, but there are just things I don't know. And so I ended up hiring a coach because I realized I looked at all my male friends and all the guys that I know that are really successful. They've all had a coach. And what's wrong with me hiring a coach? And I really went back and forth on that. Like, do I need this? Do I need someone to help me get to the next step? I'm not kidding you. In the first 30 minutes, my mind was blown. I was like, you've taken all these things I've been wanting to do and laid them out in front of me and said, this is your 5 steps you need to take. That's it. Where instead of paralyzing myself in this purgatory, if you will, of I want to do this, but I don't know how. And so I think that goes back to, invest in others, but also invest in yourself and realize you can be that coach to someone else on a non-paying basis, right? I mean, being a mentor is that, right? Giving that confidence, saying, hey, from my perspective, all you have to do, Jennifer, to start a podcast is X, Y, and Z. Look up this resource. Here you go. And so I think that, we look at it and we all say, okay, well, we're so far in our careers. Mark Zuckerberg's made it. Mark Zuckerberg probably still has a coach. And so I think that is that from that perspective to say that we don't have to do it all. We don't necessarily need to do it all. We can't do it all. My family, sometimes we have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for dinner. Lots of times it's leftovers because I only have time to cook once a week. And that just is what it is. And we're all willing to give and take where we can. And so as you look at this, whether you're starting your business or whatever that might be, really focus on what you can do and what your skill set is. And that's what I really loved about this coach I have is he's like, oh, no, I work on your positives. I don't sit here and say, why don't you have this much revenue? Why aren't you selling more of this? He's like, let's come back to that because you're really good at these things. Why are we honing in on this stuff that is not really your cup of tea? And so the strength-based approach. And so I encourage everyone who's listening to merely highlight what you're good at. And as we grow and as we evolve and we grow our businesses, find someone to supplement the stuff that you're not as good at. Because we're all not good at something. And it's not necessarily that we're not good at it. It's just, it's a lot more work for us. Maybe it's taxes, maybe it's PR, whatever that might be. Find your areas of your strength base and work on those. No, so to me, just all that to say, like, I think that there's such an opportunity to continue growing, to continue evolving, continuing learning, and then passing that learning down.
Yeah, you've touched upon a lot of really good things here because we're coming back to this whole, having the mentor, which is what you're doing. And I think I'm glad that you did get a coach. I'm super thrilled to hear that. And you're right that sometimes we don't recognize that. Again, going back to what I said earlier, we don't realize the value of that until we actually have that, right? Like I hired a coach. It's funny because I'm a coach and coaches have coaches too, right? Like we all have them, right? So I hired this mentor, I guess 2 years in November, and I paid quite a bit to hire him, but it was a really neat thing because I was trying to build out this program. And ironically enough, like I was right in the beginning stages of building this program and somehow he landed, like crossed my path right when I was getting ready to build this out. And I'm so thankful that he did because I put a pause on that program that I was building. And during the 2 years that I worked with him, it was like this was the final piece I needed to help me build and shift my program because I went from doing basically a mediocre program to a high ticket course is what I created. So I basically evolved it, changed it. It's like it's a beast, and I'm thankful for that, the fact that mentor showed up at the right time or coach or whatever you want to call him. And so I do think there's huge value in that. And again, you don't really recognize it until you go through it and you see. But you also touched upon something a minute ago about the strengths and also they helping you kind of figure out what you need to do with these ideas. Because I think a lot of times, we have all these ideas we want to do. And sometimes we just don't really know where to start. We don't know, like we were talking about my health offline. Where do you start? Like, what's the first step? And sometimes just having another person in your corner that can say, let's maybe start here is all you need to get you on the right path to moving to the next step. Right. And so
Right.
I think that's huge. And then helping you really hone in on what are your strengths and where are you thriving? Because we all know that, yes, you do so much better when you're working in your zone of flow, or, I call it flow. It's that place where you're just
Hmm.
like your sports talk, like whatever it is
You're
you're good
excited
at.
about it, right? Yeah. Well, and
Exactly.
I was going to say to you,
Exactly.
kudos to you for listening to what this coach had to say about a program that you probably felt good about. And
Yeah.
so I think that from a startup, from an entrepreneur perspective, I do a lot of coaching of businesses that are starting up, is you have to be willing to listen, but also shut it out in a sense, right? You need to be
Hmm.
willing to listen to feedback, and some of it's not going to feel real good, but we always say feedback is a gift. You have to be able
Yeah.
to cut out some of the noise that you don't think you can do a lot with, but really listen to some of that stuff that makes you a little uncomfortable, because that probably is going to push you through that threshold to make that mediocre to high ticket, as you said. And so kudos to you for being able to step back and say, I'm going to process this for a little bit and see what I can do with it.
Yeah, thank you. No, and you're right. And feedback is hard sometimes, right? Like I
Hmm.
do think that's part of the journey of us being in this space, is that yes, we have to be willing to. I always go back to, like, I think of Jordan Peterson, and I don't know how he exactly said this, but he said sometimes when you get so laser focused on your path, which we talk about putting blinders on, right? And being committed. But sometimes when you get so focused on something that you're not willing to look at anything around you, like you miss opportunities, you miss things that are
Absolutely.
coming in that may actually evolve you in a better direction. And I
Hmm.
think about this, because at this time that I was doing this, I was in the process of hiring somebody to help me build this out. And I think, goodness, Amy, had I gone through, and not that I didn't appreciate this person or the work that they would have done, but had I done this, would I've really been satisfied with what I had created? Because here I was going to get somebody to help me build this. And this one, I actually built it out myself. I did it all from ground up. And so,
Hmm.
I think you do. Sometimes you have to be willing to open up and listen to the things around you, but also know when something doesn't align with what you're trying to create, and be able to shut that out too. And I think having a coach sometimes
Hmm.
or a mentor can help you sort of figure out and kind of wade through that and see what's needs to stay and what needs to go.
Yeah. And I would say that even from a corporate, whether you work in the corporate world or you're an entrepreneur, that coach, that person to just be that litmus for you. I mean, I have some folks who just, like, I had a girl the other day who was like, I'm negotiating my salary. Can you, for a new job, can you just help me figure out what I need to do? Sure, then let's talk through it. So we went through the numbers and sort of combed through it. What do you feel comfortable with? What did you make before? And, like, I mean, really just having someone who has, like I said, just once again, a different perspective that helps you just run some numbers by someone. And I think that's so important to just have that person that's in your corner.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I like that. I do want to ask you really quick, because so let's say somebody, maybe we have this a young person that's actually maybe right now looking for a mentor. What's a way that these guys can, like, maybe go and find these, because they may be in this same place where they go, where do I start? Like, where do I look for mentors,
Hmm.
or how do I find these people?
I would say ask. It sounds strange. And I was talking to my class about this one day, is everyone has something to provide. Everyone has something to give, right? So if I'm really intrigued by what Jennifer's working on, but I'm like terrified that she's just too smart for me and not in my wheelhouse, ask, right? I think that's what it comes down to. Most people are willing to take a 15-minute phone call or to go for coffee or something. There's always that opportunity where you say, what I had a mentor that we would just go to a foundation that I'm on the board for. I just invite her to go to that with me. And that was our time to connect. That was our opportunity to introduce her to people. So if you see someone, maybe it's at a chamber event. United Way has across the country, they have a lot of young people, like programs for young entrepreneurs, or young people in their career. Sorry, I sound like an old woman saying young people. Sorry, I can't help it. But people starting their career, they have those programs. Take advantage of them. I know so many cities have different programs like that for different people in different parts of their career. Jump into those, but also don't be afraid to, if you're going to the chamber under 30, under 40 events, don't be afraid to go to a big luncheon where it's everybody from the city. that you can really dive into and tap into people. Don't be afraid to say that I read this about you. I've heard this about you. I just really want to pick your brain, or I have this really interesting, I want to be like you when I grow up. I mean, all those things are options that can be had and can be said. And I find that myself, even I'm still looking up to people who are in their careers and are coming into whole different roles. And I just ask. And the answer is, so what? My husband always says the answer is always no unless you ask. So
That's good.
maybe they say no, or I have one that lady that I connect with maybe twice a year, and she said, I can't right now, but let's talk at the end of October. And I was like, okay, sure, no problem. And so don't be afraid to ask. Also, don't be afraid if you get a call me in 3 months. That's okay too. Or I can't meet for coffee. Let's have a phone call. All those things are important, but come prepared with maybe the questions you have. I don't think anyone is ever afraid to answer questions. People love to talk about themselves too. So there's always that. But
Yeah.
really come prepared and say, this is really what I'm intrigued. I've seen that you've done this in your career. I'd like to do that too. How did you get there? How did you do that? What was the hardest thing you did? What would you do differently? Do I need to go back to school? Do I don't know, need to go to clown school? I don't know, whatever it might be. What are those things that you've done that really have impacted you? And don't be afraid to ask those questions. And don't be afraid to ask that in small talk in the very beginning. If you meet Jennifer at an outing, you say, I really want to start a podcast. How'd you do it? That's
Right.
great small talk, because Jennifer's going to share those little nuggets, and you may get 4 minutes of time, but you're going to get these nuggets. And so don't be afraid to ask, 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 ask. And that's the best thing I can say is you have something to offer, because guess what? If someone asks me that, I learn more from my students than I feel like they probably learn from me, because I'm always listening. I'm listening to what products they're engaged with, why they're engaged with them, what challenges they're facing. All those things now go to help me navigate and define my strategy and learn what I'm doing for and working with people their age. So just remember that there's something for everyone. And the CEO who is 70, 65, 55, you know more about TikTok than they do. Just those kinds of things are simple things to just think about. Remember, you know more than you think you do, and you have more value than you probably think you do as well.
This was good. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, no, and I
Of
agree with you. I
course.
love the just ask part. I think that's great. And you're right. I do a lot of networking here. In fact, I was at an event last week and there were two young, and I'm talking one of them was 24. I don't know how old the other one was. These were entrepreneurs. One of the guys, in fact, he called me. I've got to return his call. He started his business as 19, started a cleaning company, and now here I think he's 23 or 24 now, and he's had this company. So yeah, it's really neat to see these young people, and I've actually interviewed a few young people that have started businesses on between the shows at different times, interviewed them, and it's really fun to get their perspective. But yeah, it makes you wonder. I mean, they have to be asking questions, because I agree with you that the only way you're going to learn is really by having these conversations. I know, so
Mhm.
much of what I've learned over, I tell people, my entrepreneur journey has spanned from all the way from 1999 until now. I've learned a lot of things, but I will tell you the greatest growth that I've had has been in the last, like, the years that I've been doing my podcast, because I have talked to so many incredible people on the show, but also through networking. And I have learned so many things by just asking questions, from these
Mhm.
people, like, what do they do? How'd they get in there? What did they have to overcome to do it? And there's
Yep.
universal things you learn. A lot of the things are universal, but sometimes just hearing it from a different person, the perspective they take on it and how they share it can come across very differently than, say, somebody else. So I'm with
Absolutely.
you in asking questions.
Be curious. It's great. Be like a child. Be curious and ask why. Try to understand.
Yeah, I love it. Well, Amy, this has been great. And thank you. I think the big emphasis here is really on, finding a mentor and finding a coach and asking questions and networking. I think there's a lot here, but I really think the big message is about finding that support system that you need, which I think is huge. And it's so
Absolutely.
instrumental into our success. So let's say somebody listening to this wants to get in touch with you. Maybe they want to learn a little bit more about what you've got going on over there, reach out to you and follow up. How do we want to, or where do we want to send them is the question.
Well, multiple places. So our website is lastnightsgame.com. Um, Instagram, I am the person who goes through all the DMs. You can always find me there. But also emails Amy at lastnightsgame.com.
Awesome. This has been fun. I'm so excited about what you're
Thank
doing.
you.
And I want to tell you thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your wisdom with us and all your greatness. It's been fun.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And to our audience, of course, if you enjoy the show, head on over to Apple, give us a review over there, hit that subscribe button on the YouTube so we can just keep sharing all this amazing content with you. And in the meantime, you guys take care, be safe, be kind to one another. We will see you next time.